but they see this as a war for their existential survival. We'll not recover from this quickly. And by the time we have recovered from it, we will have lost a few hundred million people. Now, the technical economic term for this sort of situation is fuck. German manufacturing will be dead within a year and a half. The entire Ukrainian metals industry is offline. He has consolidated more power to himself than any leader in world history.
Peter Zeihan is a New York Times best-selling author, geopolitical strategist, and speaker. His books have been recommended by the likes of Mitt Romney and Ian Bremmer. With a keen eye toward what will drive tomorrow's headlines, his irreverent approach transforms topics that are normally dense into accessible, relevant takeaways for audiences of all types. In this episode of Essential Investing, Zeihan breaks down Russia's motives for attacking Ukraine and China's inevitable demise. Stay until the end if you want to learn how to prepare yourself for the end of globalization.
In the middle, the green, that's the Russian wheat belt. That's where you live if you're in Russia. That's 99% of the population. If you go to the right, to the north, to the blue, that's tundra, that's tagai. Nobody lives there. If you go to the left, to the south, that's desert. No one lives there. Now, when the Russians look at this, they get really depressed because of the beige. Wide open territory that's completely economically non-viable, but brackets everywhere that they live. When the Soviet system existed, they controlled every single one of those access points. When the Soviet system fell, the Russians went from controlling all of them to one. Everything that Putin has done since has been about getting a military footprint in each and every one of those zones. They now have footprints in 5. Unfortunately for Ukraine, it's not that Ukraine is in an access point, but it's on the way to 2 of them. So the Russian goal here has always been not just to conquer all of Ukraine, but then to use Ukraine as a military launch pad to those 2 next sections. But they see this as a war for their existential survival, which means that every tool is on the table. And if we get to the point where the Russians can overwhelm Ukraine and then come for NATO, we know we will have to fight them. And we know we will beat them on the conventional battlefield easily. And we know they will use nukes. The Russian lesson was that, okay, our propaganda was wrong. They're not going to welcome us in. And that means the Ukrainians themselves are a problem. And so we're going to fight the war we know how to fight with artillery. And we're going to advance slowly through eastern Ukraine and the Donbass. And we are going to specifically target every piece of civilian infrastructure we see, especially agricultural infrastructure. Because if we destroy the capacity of this territory to support a population, it will self-separate into 2 groups. One group will become refugees. They will leave. We will never have to worry about them again. Anyone who stays is clearly a fighter, and they can be shot on sight.
Before we see more of Peter, I think it's worth noting that this is a big fat "you're nuts" to Ray Dalio, who we featured in episode 1, where Dalio explained that China's rise and domination of the US is near inevitable. Who do you think is right? Ray Dalio that China will dominate, or Peter Zeihan that China is a dead man walking? Let us know in the comments. Remember to keep it nice, as I bet we have both sides of the argument represented. Hit the like, subscribe, and bell button to get immediate notification of tomorrow's video, where Peter Zeihan talks about deglobalization, inflation, and China.
Ukraine is going to end up being a food importer sometime next year, most likely. That is going to have catastrophic consequences throughout the global system. Russia plus Belarus specifically provide 40% of the world's potash. Natural gas is the primary input for nitrogen fertilizers. But the damage to the fertilizer system has already been done, and we will get hit with that next year. We'll not recover from this quickly. And by the time we have recovered from it, we will have lost a few hundred million people. Today, we use neon to focus the laser apertures for semiconductor fabrication facilities. 80% of the world's neon comes from the former Soviet space. The other 20%, that's all in China. Now, the technical economic term for this sort of situation is fuck. Now, in the 2015 omnibus bill, President Obama gained the power for the White House to summarily end all American oil exports with a stroke of a pen. In any environment where we have a shortage of crude because of Russian losses, especially if it's 5 million, you can expect within a matter of hours that the Biden administration is going to slam the door shut on export capacity in order to keep the American market supersaturated, in order to keep American crude prices more affordable. He, like his predecessor, is a populist. Now, what Granholm said she wanted actually was the refined product. She doesn't have the power to do that. Biden does not have the power to do that. But if you trap the crude in the American market and force it to just go to American refiners, it achieves most of what she's after. Now that, of course, is going to trigger a bit of a crude mismatch. Here are all of the world's major crude grades. If you're at the top left, you're light sweet. If you're at the bottom right, you're heavy sour. Everything in blue, that's American shale. All super light, it's all super sweet. That is what's going to be trapped here. In the bottom right, you see the orange. That's Russian Urals. That's what what we're going to lose. 5 million days of moderate heavy, moderate sour. Yes, middle distillates are going to be a bitch, because in Germany, they take Russian cheap natural gas, they process that into petrochemicals. That is the foundation of their heavy and their medium manufacturing, including automotive. You remove that base material, the rest of the German manufacturing system collapses. German manufacturing will be dead within a year and a half. Germany's not coming back. If the war ended tomorrow, it's probably already too late. We're now in a situation where the pipelines that flow through the war zones are Germany's only reliable supply. This is going to get significantly worse for them. You guys are primarily interested in the hot rolled for pipes. Now here in the United States, again, we're pretty agnostic about where we get stuff. So we don't do a lot of the core blast furnace smelting. Now this means a couple of things. First of all, remember with neon, that means we don't even have air separation units because we don't even have the blast furnaces. The entire Ukrainian metals industry is offline. We've lost about 10% of global steel capacity because of the war, and we've lost about 3/4 of access to pig iron on a global scale. So this is China's last decade. Chairman Xi has created a cult of personality that is so extreme, and he has shot the messenger literally so many times that no one wants to bring him any information. He has consolidated more power to himself than any leader in world history. And as a result, we're seeing policy collapses across the entire system. The two most dramatic, we had power outages that started last March. It's apparent that Xi didn't know they happened until September. We didn't get a policy to deal with it until November, and they're only now getting patched up. And of course, the other one is COVID. Natural immunity isn't an option because the Chinese have, until now, fairly successfully kept COVID out of the population. And from the vaccine side, the Chinese vaccines don't work. So if China were to open, you're talking about 2 to 5 million deaths a month for at least 6 months. Lockdowns are their only option. We got about 90 million Chinese under hard lockdown right now, and about another 250 million under soft lockdown. So this is going to be the situation until the Chinese can catch up with a better vaccine, because they've spent the last 2.5 years saying that the American ones make you magnetic and infertile. 3 years ago, the Chinese had an outbreak of something called African swine fever. It's basically Ebola for pigs. They say they wiped it out. If you look at a heat map of where cases are in East Asia, all of Chinese borders are raging with ASF, but there's not a single case within China. The chances that they're going to lose pork again are pretty high. The last time they had to wipe out 2/3 of their herd. All that's left in that situation is rice. Rice is the most phosphate-demanding crop humans grow. China is the world's largest supplier. They've shut their borders to exports. This is the USS Ford. This is our newest supercarrier, most powerful military platform humans have ever built. By itself, one Ford class can take on any but the top 7 air forces in the world. You want to knock off a country, this is the tool for the job. You want to patrol the global sea lanes to make commerce safe. Oh my God, this is a horrible choice because there's only 4 of them. They can only be in 4 places at a time. Instead, you need these bad boys, destroyers. You need hundreds of them, probably 800 to patrol the global sea lanes. We have 70.
I highly recommend checking out this video, where New York Times best-selling economist Jim Rickards reveals the unspoken truth of why the Ukraine war will lead to mass starvation in key countries, and the downstream effects that will catch many investors by surprise.